So Acorn Risk Technology was doing that. An Exemplar were moving more and more towards selling Macs, not Acorns. So people had kind of latched onto that as a thing. The teams there were really trying to push the Macs rather than the Acorns. And there were endless fights about you're not selling enough of our product with the Exemplar joint venture. There was a lot of argy-bargy and stuff going on. Now, one of the big issues I was facing at that time, this is actually from a year later, but this one I found, was I was constantly worried about stock. Now, because of the history that Acorn had, they'd bought lots of different bits, there were components, there was all sorts of things sitting in inventory in a warehouse in Cambridge, actually. So that was a stock report, actually, from the year later, that shows over £1 million worth of stock. So getting rid of stock, managing stock, writing down things which there is absolutely no way we could sell was an important part. So this was trading off the profit we were making against write-downs on stock and trying to get rid of anything. So when we're doing these deals, part of it is like, we've got this, does anybody want these? You know, can we get them to anybody? And we were working with the RISC PC. Now, at that time, one of the things that was happening is that there was increasing focus on EMC, on electromagnetic radiation and stuff. And the problem we had with the RISC PC, which was a lovely product, and I really enjoyed it, really liked it, was there was just no way that thing was going to pass modern EMC tests. The plastic case just did not lend itself to that. And pretty much, we looked at all sorts of things. We sprayed it, we tried bonding it, we tried all sorts of things, and it just really wasn't working. So we thought and also, we were always using a slightly more exotic version of everything than the standard mainstream PC market. So what was happening is our costs were always higher than anything you could get anywhere else, and we weren't meeting the requirements. So it was, we were doing EMC test, we did all sorts of things to try and figure out how to do that. So we actually, and so that's one part of it, and then we had all sorts of compatibility problems with the new versions of hard drives, floppy drives would come out, and they wouldn't quite work on our platform. We were always tracking and trying to keep up. And then you had things like Java, which were free, of course, except they're not. If you're a computer manufacturer, you then have to pay a license, and that was killing us. You know, to actually do that, we tried to get a contra deal with Oracle about the network computers, but it never really worked out. So we carried on doing that. So I was battling with the stock. We got these sort of rising tide of issues, and we thought, actually, what we need to do is we need to completely change the way that we're doing this and come up with something a bit of a different approach. But we were carrying on. We ran Acorn World again, which was great. We had a great time. I can't remember if that's the year we were smashing up PCs or not. That was certainly one year I did it. We had all sorts of crazy... if you've ever run events, that was the most fun you could possibly have running an event, because we could do anything, and it didn't matter. And we just, you know, it was quite entertaining. But we were just trying to generate excitement and create something that the rest of the community would actually bond with. And we actually finished that year with about £1 million profit again. So we've done that for 2 years running, as well as starting to manage some of this stock stuff, which is quite a. When you see this list, you'll see some of the things. So the numbers on that for cost may or may not be the cost we actually paid for it. It may be a written down value. It may so, you know, this is accountancy rather than reality. Anyway, so we've been going quite well. And David Lee, who was a CEO at the time, thought we were doing quite well, and we really needed to get, because we were actually making money, most of the rest of the business wasn't, he thought we might as well put us in our own little box and allow us to carry on doing that. So we actually formed a workstation division in March '98. So this is great. We got our own little world. We got, you know, carrying beavering away. And we started developing the RISC PC 2, the second generation. Now, this is getting over compatibility problems, cost of components, and various other things. So we went probably badly wrong in terms of using standard casing, standard metalwork, standard, because they were so much cheaper than anything we could do. There is a very particular manufacturing problem that we had, which is we were trying to make these things in thousands. And if anybody knows anything about manufacturing, it's exactly the wrong volume to do anything in. You can do tens and hundreds, no problem. You can do that at prototype levels. They cost a bit, but that's okay. You can do that. You can do tens to hundreds of thousands, no problem. But thousands is just awkward because you have all the costs of volume manufacturing and none of the payback. And that's the sort of volume we were in. So we had to, we felt, use as many of those components as we could, as many standard bits of computer chassis and various other things that we didn't have to tool. Because as soon as you tool something, it costs tens of thousands of pounds that you then have to amortize over a few thousand units. And that doesn't work. That really doesn't work. Sorry. So yeah. So we came up, we hatched this plan, we made it. Intriguingly, when we were working with the designer suggested making it translucent, the plastic front. God, I wish I'd listened to him. But yeah, so we were doing. Oh, that's a more random bump. So yeah, so that's the original launch. Those were some of the original launch photographs. And we came up. We did this naming thing. So yeah, so do pass them on. Do pass this stuff around to the back. And probably my worst ever mistake doing any marketing ever, we came up with a name which was the project code name, which we'd been developing it under. And I'm sorry, everybody. Really, I am sorry. Lots of people warned me. It should have been called RISC-PC 2. Even though it looked nothing like a RISC-PC, we still should have called it RISC-PC 2. Yeah, it was my, yeah, it was tragic. But we were spending money developing this thing because we knew we needed a new platform. We couldn't carry on selling the old platform, unfortunately. We had to do something different. So by July, my little workstations division, we got revenue of 3.6 million. We were making a gross margin of about 876,000. So that's reasonable. But we spent 1.9 million on development and 600,000 on sales marketing. So we were losing. We lost by that stage in the year 2 million. But that's because we were investing in the next generation product. So we were, so we'd gone from a nice little cash cow that was generating a bit of funds to soaking up more money from a group that nobody else was making any money in either. So on the 15th of June, there was a big shake-up. And David Lee, who had been running it, decided that the board decided that they didn't want him. And so they sacked him, they sacked Peter Bonder, Graham Dodgson, Lorraine Buckman. There was basically the whole top tier of management went, and a guy called Stan Boland, who'd been the finance director, took over. I don't know if anybody's seen Stan Boland pop up again recently. He's a serial sort of starting up businesses and making money. Yeah, he does pop up, usually with something a bit intriguing. I mean, I must admit, he is unbelievably good at pitching. If you put him in front of a room full of investors, he somehow manages to tell a story which is absolutely excellent and really, really, kind of gets them and they understand, and he really captures them. I watched that happen once. He was, the night before, he was with Sophie Wilson, and it's like, what on earth are we going to tell these people? And they were bouncing some ideas around. The next day he told them, and they're like, oh yeah, that's great. And you're thinking, how do you do that? I have no idea. He was very good at that. But his main mission was nothing to do with selling product, nothing to do with technology, nothing to do with anything. His main mission was to get the ARM shareholding that Acorn owned out of Acorn without having to pay any tax. That was it. Because the ARM shareholding that Acorn owned, having spun out ARM earlier on, was worth more than the value of Acorn. But there was a tax liability. So you're sitting on this thing that's like this big, you're worth this much, if you can get that out in some form. Now, he worked on that with lots of different advisors and lots of different times. But that was what he was working on. So at that point, what was going to happen is the whole thing was going to implode. They were going to get rid of bits. And in June, 26th of June, it was, they actually asked me to start up a thing called Project Neon. So here's where it might go. Oh, yeah, that was David Lee getting fired. Sorry, that's David Lee getting fired. Newspaper cutting. I managed to keep from that. And then this was the new organisational chart. Understand. So you can see if anybody's interested in that. And there's an internal email that came around. So what were we doing? So he then came to me and said, right, what we're thinking of doing is we want you to get rid of this workstation stuff because it's just a mess and we don't want it anymore because it's not ARM. Would you like to do a management buyout? Okay. So he appointed me to lead a management buyout, and we set some terms of agreement. Now, this is where, these are probably some of the more interesting ones, to actually start working that up. And there's a heads of agreement for how the management buyout would work. So just to give you some sort of perspective. I'm starting here, by the way, so you're welcome to can have a look at these later on. So what were we going to do as a management buyout? Workstations business, really tricky. Phoebe, difficult. But the really big white hope was the thin client business, because the whole Oracle thing had been going. They were sort of pretty much baked then. They worked. They did what they said on the tin. The only downside with that whole network thin client is the only question I ever got asked by anybody about a thin client was, does it run Word? That's it. That's all anybody ever asked me about them. There was nothing else. Personally, I thought it was a genius idea. They were small, they were cheap, they were low power, they didn't make a noise, they gave centralized control to people. I mean, all sorts of really major upside benefits. But the big question was, does it run Word? And for that, we needed Citrix. But we had Citrix, it worked, we could do that. And so the other thing I had to try and do was work out how we recoup some of this investment that we'd put into the RISC-PC2, Phoebe. And at the point we did this management buyout, we had £250,000 worth of parts and £300,000 worth of committed manufacturing, because we're running lead times. You've got to start buying stuff to make things. So we're already sitting there on £500,000 worth of bits. So we've kind of got to finish it, otherwise we just write off all those bits. And you can't really do much on that. So I spent about 15 hours a day, I think it was about that, writing spreadsheets with a 5-year model of everything we were going to do. You can see some of the things there. And I came up with a business plan. All right, that was the... Oh, right. Right, okay, so that was some of the original... So this is a copy of Project Neon business plan that came out of that. It does have some of the numbers in, so I'm starting here. I could start at the back, sorry. But you're welcome to have a look at these. And I was working with Arthur Anderson. They appointed Arthur Anderson to work with me. They didn't really do an awful lot to help me, in all honesty, other than ask really obnoxious and difficult questions about stuff that was all in the future, and I had no idea what was going to happen and things. So if anybody's ever tried to do business planning in a technology, in a fairly rapidly evolving technology market, it's not easy, because you're having to guess, you're having to make stuff up. It's all a bit flaky. But you kind of have to write some stuff down. So that was the outline for the business plan. Sorry, I got those in slightly out of order. That's the outline for the business plan that we were working to. So you can have a look at those and pass them around. So whilst this was going on, we were planning to launch RISC-PC2 at some small event up in the north of England somewhere. Can't remember where that was. Yeah. So yes. So the team I was working with were all busy working our way through doing that. I mean, there was all sorts of stuff we were doing for Acorn World. That's Channel Connect. That's some. Oh, it's RISC Technologies. Oh, I should have given you that as well. Yeah. Anyway, that's a bit out of order. I'll put this round at the back. There we go. Keep it more in line with. That should have gone with those. You're welcome to have a look at So we were busy. We were busy trying to get Acorn World going. We were, booking venues, selling tickets, and all sorts of things. What's that underneath here? Okay, I have no idea. I did have it when I came, but anyway. Anyway, so we were busy trying to do all of that and actually launch that. And there are some press releases that I've got that we put together for. There we go. Acorn Worlds in the Docklands Arena. That's it. That's the one. So alongside trying to do a management buyout, we were trying to launch our biggest product that we'd ever developed and run our own show. So you get the impression there's a fair bit going on for not a humongously big team. So that was Acorn World, showing various different press releases and things like that. So working on that. By about the end of July, so about a month, 6 weeks later, we had Arthur Anderson reviewed the business plan and told us basically that it wasn't going to work. And actually, you could almost see that. In hindsight, I probably tried to keep too much of the business. And thinking about it later, if we'd been able to strip back more, bin more, and just focus on one or two key things, it probably would have been a more effective business plan. But I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to throw away the whole community. I didn't want to throw away the computer business. I didn't want to throw away everything that I'd been working on for the last few years, because why would you? So that was a pretty sad point, really, when we thought, this is just, I can't see how we get this to work. Now, the really sad part about this is that at this point, we would have had the licensing deal, we'd have had RISC-OS, we'd have had everything neatly packaged in a block that could have gone somewhere, rather than distributed random shambles that it ended up in at the end of everything. But if we'd managed to get that right, we would have had all of that. We would have had a RISC-OS business. We would have potentially been able to think about using RISC PCs as staging posts for development for network thin client computing. It would all have been about the thin client computers. It wouldn't have been about more desktop computers, because that's just the way. That's just where the volume in any business was. If we could have ever got that to work, we might have got back into education then. And then, so on the 17th of September, we all got called over the road, and that was my letter, which I hang on to. And basically, he shut the business, just bang like that. It was very sad. And then later on, that was the thing that happened. They did eventually manage after that, all of that. After getting them, and a small company that Stan took a few bits of technology with for himself called Element 14, which later went on to do things like make Raspberry Pis, which is kind of intriguing. So the whole team was made redundant. The whole network computer business. They kept a few technical people, and pretty much everything else was just shut. Anything in the warehouses was just, anybody wanted it, So we all went to the pub at that point. And so that was it. We were done. I remember walking into the office and the phone was ringing. It's like, I'm not going to answer that. There's nothing I can say. It's over. And that was it. It was a really sad moment, because we'd worked really hard for about 2 or 3 years when it probably would have died before. We kept it going for another 2 or 3 years. We got the strong arm out. We almost finished RISC-BC2. Very nearly finished Phoebe. Almost made that. Almost got the whole thing packaged up. Didn't quite manage it, unfortunately. So I'm sorry that I wasn't able to do that management buy. I'm sorry I wasn't able to kind of see my way through that. But we did try, and we did manage to keep it going for a little bit longer. So that was basically what I wanted to say and take you through. I hope that makes sense. I'm happy to answer any questions. Feel free to carry on looking at these various different things. There's quite a lot in some of these, obviously. Is most of this new to people? I don't really know.
I think I've picked up quite a few bits from
Yeah.
reading here and there. I think I've done a lot of business course, not
Yeah.
business studies, like
Yeah.
a degree or anything like that.
Yeah.
Trying to shape a business in new technology must be one of the
Yeah.
because you don't know where everyone else is.
Pete Bonder was quite good at it. He just invented things and just made up stuff, and it kind of worked-ish sometimes. Didn't actually make a lot of money doing that, I must admit. But he did try that, and he did have that sort of vision. I was much more about making the money and stock and hardware and manufacturing and things, because that was more my background. And actually, you have to worry about that stuff, otherwise you end up bleeding cash.
Well, I was having a look at the stock you had, and of course, just-in-time stuff you would have towards no stock, unless you knew you had like a regular fulfillment going out, to different territories and stuff like that. So you just won't keep things.
But this is a legacy this is a legacy from all kinds of things. I mean, at the back end of that stock report are clan T-shirts for 10 grand's worth of T-shirts. I mean, it's like,
I saw the books as well.
yeah, well, yes, you kind of look at this stuff and think, how does that happen? But it was a promotional thing, so I mean, that was a cost. We'd have written that off, but it's still sitting on the books. We'd have paid the money for those. Yeah, it's interesting. So that was my little ramble through where we came from and what we did.